I am using my points of reviewing each book as my own opinion for the purpose of commentary. In addition, this is intended for educational and informational purposes, and I do not claim ownership over the original work. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. We are on letter 10 on the letters of Marsilio Ficino. This letter is titled My Book on the Sun, and he's writing to a physician named Marsilio. He's talking about how the moon is exalted in a region from the ascendant, and he's saying the sun is in the ninth and is a great religion. And he's saying how there's a sun that has risen for him, and he's going to explain to his friend. That's the short letter 10, and now we're already on to letter 11, to George of Cyprus, another physician. He's suggesting a book to read, a Theban book on the sun and light. And he's saying, this will give you perpetual love. And he's quoting Virgil. The sun will give you signs. Who would dare to say that the sun is false? Now that's Virgil. And we can finish these letter 11 because they're both very short. And it's talking about the sun. And ending with this quote from Virgil. Virgil's very interesting. An ancient, one of the most well-known poets in the Roman Empire. I would say the most well-known and influential poet is Virgil in regarding the Roman Empire. A lot of philosophers quote Virgil. Now, I am uneducated with Virgil's work. I know writers such as Cicero, Marcus Aurelius, Plotinus, and St. Augustine. That's my reference to Virgil. St. Augustine, for example, really references Virgil in his Confessions book. And it's interesting because St. Augustine, 2 to 3 centuries after Virgil, and at the climax of the Roman Empire being destroyed by the barbarians, St. Augustine, again, is referencing Virgil, but he's doing it in a way that he recognizes his spiritual and intellectual transformation. He used to hate studying Virgil as a kid because he was forced to do it in the school. Rhetoric was the top position that young men would desire at the time, because a rhetorician, or one who's an expert in rhetoric, can become lawyers in the Roman Republic, parts of the Senate. Now, in addition, these experts in speech become very close to the emperor. You could argue more or less Aristotle was a king of rhetoric and influenced Alexander. but I'm focusing more on Virgil and the Roman thought, because Marsilio Ficino is a Roman Catholic priest. Virgil was a Roman poet. And we're talking about the sun. So what does Virgil, Roman philosophy, and the sun have to do with each other? Well, if I were to distill the definition of philosophy, more or less, it's the preparation for death through intellectual and spiritual practices. So that being said, intellectually, you want to study the stars, and you want to read poetry, and you want to study math. And spiritually, you want to look at symbols, you want to sing or chant certain harmonies that are reflective of higher patterns, such as classical orchestra music that has more sophisticated patterns than a modern day trap beat or modern day rock or jazz guitar riff. So we're both reading Virgil, we are studying math, and we are chanting heavenly songs. This will bring us closer to the one. And Constantine the Great worshipped the sun. Sol Invictus was a very popular cult in the early, I would say more to the end of the Roman Republic. Let's do a little research. St. Augustine was writing, as I said, during the fall of Rome. Which was 300 to 400 AD, since St. Augustine was born in 354 AD and died in 370 AD. This was the time Rome was falling. Shortly before that, Constantine the Great, in 270, which was when he was born, 272, only about 100 years before St. Augustine, Constantine worshipped the sun, Sol Invictus. And you can see the symbols in different architectural structures in Rome. You can see references to Sol Invictus. You can see the similarities between the cult of Mithras and Sol Invictus. The idea of an ultimate sacrifice for the ultimate light above the sun. A lot of the West was worshipping the sun. Constantine the Great was a pagan in East Persia. You have Zoroastrianism, fire worship, the worship of the sun. So this idea of the sun being God is not a new idea. Let's continue to letter 12. We are about 10 minutes in. We'll probably finish on letter 12, since this first two letters has me thinking deeply about Sol Invictus, St. Augustine, and we'll finish this thought that I have about the pagan worship of the sun. Now, Christianity is different from paganism. How different from paganism is Christianity, is my question for today. How much different is Christianity from paganism? Jesus Christ claimed he is the light of the world. If you look at the Catholic Mass, it seems like there is a climax or a pinnacle of the the worship session, and that climax is the Eucharist, when the priest holds up the cracker and the church is silent and on their knees. The priest raises up the cracker from the altar to the sky up above and holds it there. If you haven't seen this, I would suggest looking up, type in Catholic Mass consecration. Again, you'll see the priest hold up the cracker wafer for at least 10 seconds, and the entire church is silent in adoration. This is a representation of the sun rising. Christ died on the cross. That's a proposition that will already box out certain people. Arabs believe that Jesus Christ did not die on a cross. I shouldn't say Arabs. Not all Arabs are Muslim, but the Muslims believe Jesus Christ did not die. It was a projection or a ghost of Allah that was dying on the cross. It wasn't Christ himself. It was an illusion through spiritual means by divine providence in the Muslim tradition. Again, Christ died. That's what Christians believe. And when the priest raises up the bread, that's a representation of Christ raising up from the tomb. St. Paul made somewhat of a reference, I'm paraphrasing. He said that the Christian faith is meaningless if that person does not believe in the resurrection. It's pretty clear. One of the apostles making it dogmatic to believe Christ died and Christ rose, and that's part of that Catholic ritual. The sun is always setting, it is always rising. It's a perpetual pattern. So these rituals are perpetual patterns. Perpetual patterns of what? They're perpetual patterns of reality. And that's kind of the argument for participating in rituals. It allows people to, similar to yoga or a nap, your body and your mind are resetting. But like with any kind of electronic or program, you do have a factory reset, and every program is different because every programmer is different. Now I'm talking about rituals. Not all rituals are good because not every programmer is good. Not every programmer has knowledge, doesn't know the syntax of the computer language. If you don't understand the grammar or the syntax of the computer language, you're already going to have trouble programming. But once you understand the syntax of the program language, you also need to have an intuition, an intuitive spirit, where you're not boxed into the program. You're able to branch out and to step into the shoes of the user. My point being, be careful on what rituals you participate in. The rituals that you participate in need to reflect perpetual patterns of reality. if the ritual is not true, because there is truth in reality, again, if you don't accept this, you're a sophist. That's okay. We have choice. I'm trying to argue that that position is less rational, the sophist position. So you want ritual that's mathematically provable, and also need ritual that is beauty, because God is beauty. If you reject that, you're sophist. Plato believed beauty is a transcendental of God. Beauty brings you closer to God because God is beauty. Okay, so your ritual needs to be truthful, needs to be grounded in math, cannot be arbitrary, and the ritual needs to be beautiful. The last thing is good. The last transcendental of Plato is good. The ritual needs to bring goodness. Now, I think in order to define goodness, you need to understand Plato. Now, there's different degrees of understanding. I know I need to define my words here, but Plato's three transcendentals I see are similar to the Holy Trinity in the Christian tradition. I have trouble explaining the Holy Trinity because it is a mystery, and I am very intermediate on my knowledge of it. But if you want to understand what goodness means in Plato's framework, you need to understand truth and you need to understand beauty because they're intertwined. So I'll finish this last thought with Dostoevsky. His quote, "Beauty will save the world." I would highly encourage anyone struggling with the idea of goodness and truth, start with beauty. Because most humans already have a foundation of knowledge when it comes to beauty. I think people's first experience with beauty is the love they get from their parents, and then the nutrition you get from food, and then the light you get from the sun when you wake. Now, a baby is not conscious of these things, but the baby has a consciousness. The baby is alive. Similar to baby food, yeah, the baby is not eating surf and turf, but the baby is still eating some type of food. My point is, the baby doesn't understand truth, beauty, goodness, but it understands it to a degree. You can see how babies react when they don't get the milk. You can see how babies react when their siblings get the milk before them. There's a consciousness, and again, there's a foundational understanding of these transcendentals in Plato. Again, if you're struggling with truth, I don't believe in truth. If you're struggling with goodness, I don't believe in things that are good, or I don't believe good is even a part of reality. Nothing is good. If this is the framework you're working with, a nihilistic framework, of those who are more inclined to Nietzsche and that philosophy, focus on beauty. Okay, we're on the letter 12, and this letter is my book on the sun that has been sent to you. And this is to a gentleman named Basio Ugolini. Okay, so letter 12 doesn't make sense to me. It's a reference to Apollo and Bacchus, who are brothers. I have No idea about this mythology. It makes no sense to me. Marsilio is saying how they're brothers and who greets who first. Uh, he's saying Phoebus who approaches Bacchus, hoping that he can come back with wine. This letter doesn't make sense to me, but we'll finish here on letter 12 a little bit earlier than normal today. We'll continue letter 13 next time, titled Favorable Auspice for Philosophy from Mercury, Saturn, and the Sun. Okay, that sounds a little more dynamic, but this last reading, extremely important. My brain is fried, but think about that idea of occult worship the sun and how Christians, to a degree, follow that same tradition, as it seems. Thank you. We will continue later on the letters of Marsilio Ficino.